Dust of snow.
Hello and welcome everyone. Don't you think poems like these grow on you with time?
Robert Frost does that with his poems, with almost all of them. He could be talking about the traffic or the weather and still manage to hide 100 metaphors and 100 miracles of meanings.
Oh yes, that's why we have so many of his poems in our curriculum. Big ideas don't need big words. And that's why, as an exception, today we are going to start by talking a little about the poet himself. Robert Lee Frost, March 26, 1874 to January 29, 1963, was an American poet who was virtually unknown for the first 40 years of his life. He exploded on the scene after returning from England at the beginning of World War I. His work frequently employed settings from rural life in New England in the early 20th century, using them to examine complex social and philosophical themes. One of the most popular and critically respected American poets of the 20th century, Frost was honored frequently during his lifetime, receiving 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry and admiration of the American President John F. Kennedy. He became one of America's rare public literary figures, almost an artistic institution, and the unofficial poet laureate of the United States. Rural life is a consistent theme in Robert's poetry, as is simplistic language that is pleasing to the ear. He felt strongly that poetry was best appreciated when read aloud. Dust of Snow was published in the 1923 poetry collection New Hampshire, which won a Pulitzer Prize. It was one of the shortest poems in the collection and has one single sentence. The poem was originally titled Favor in 1920, later renamed as Snow Dust in 1921. And finally Dust of Snow in 1923. It was set to music by Elliott Carter in one of his most famous musical compositions.
Thank you. Let me take up the explanation now. The title informs us that it's the middle of the winter season. Winters are long and hard in northern countries and often associated with gloom. The speaker is standing beneath a hemlock tree. The poisonous hemlock is actually a herb, not a proper tree. The tree hemlock is a common, non-poisonous coniferous tree shown here. As often happens with Robert Frost's poems, people arrive at some really awkward and incorrect conclusions. In this poem's case, it is often assumed that the speaker in the poem went to the hemlock tree to commit suicide. But that is very much incorrect. So it was just a random tree in the speaker's way and he happened to stop under it for a moment. The way a crow. A crow is common, unattractive and black. Its choice as an agent of change is surprising. But here it is. The crow shook down on me. The crow, of course, didn't shake it down with intentions to help anyone. It was just going about its usual ways. It's not how or why it happened, but what it led to. The dust of snow. There are thick layers of snow on the tree, and the crow's landing unsettles it, and some particles fall down on the speaker from a hemlock tree. As already explained, the hemlock tree is not poisonous, but it may be a symbol of something perceived as dangerous, even if wrongly. Has given my heart a change of mood. The way it happens reaches straight to the speaker's heart. He was lost deep in thoughts, probably some worry or regret, and paralyzed by his own thoughts. Then suddenly, the fresh, cold touch of snow on his head, his face, his neck, and maybe his palms suddenly wakes him up to the present moment. The white, serene surroundings, full of nature's beauty, and majesty. And it gives him the change he desperately needed. All he needed was a little break from his mental paralysis. And he gets that, thanks to this random act of unintended kindness by a crow. And saved some part. Not all of it. So this was not a life-changing miracle, but still a very much needed break. A welcome relief that gave him just enough strength to save some part of a day I had rued. He was just having a bad day. Nothing uncommon. A bad day doesn't mean a bad life. So we have to be careful to not blow things out of proportion. If it was his whole life he had rued, then the falling dust of snow wouldn't have been able to bring him out. He would have dismissed it instantly. It was only because he kept the rowing in limits that he could benefit from the little incident. It doesn't take something or someone beautiful to do something beautiful. It doesn't need helpful intentions to do something helpful. The little things in life, all around us, are their own miracles and their own mires. It's all a matter of perception, awareness and readiness within us. Do not get stuck in a single hope or memory. Accept the dynamic nature of life and keep moving on.
Thank you. Let me take up the analysis now. Let's discuss the characters first. The narrator. He had a bad day, but he is not a pessimist. He is in a gloomy mood, but capable of being brought out of it with some help. He is momentarily paralyzed by his thoughts while standing under the tree, trying to make sense of things. But the touch of snow suddenly brings him back to life, and in that little instant, he finds reason and courage enough to let go and move on. He decides to save whatever is left of the day that had already been wasted by negativity. He has rare inner strength and sense of awareness that saves him from getting sucked in the pit of pessimism. He is a fighter at ease with life's changeability. The crow. The common ugly crow gives the narrator a much-needed break from his own disturbing thoughts and saves his day. The narrator rules the day, but thanks to the crow only partially, not completely. The crow is kind of an unlikely angel, and a reminder that hope and salvation are not offices of beauty. Anything and anyone can bring you that, if you let them. The hemlock tree. The hemlock tree stands for the misunderstood, ignored support sources of our everyday life. The very name hemlock brings to our mind death and end. That's the common opinion, the tradition, in reality a prejudice. Nothing by itself is good or evil. It's how much you allow it that defines its possibilities. The narrator allowed a scavenger bird, the crow, and the poison synonym, the hemlock, to give him a wonderful, refreshing experience, and that is as much to the credit of the narrator as to the nature and its forces. Now let's discuss the major themes and lessons. Nature. The amazing power of nature to rejuvenate us is beautifully brought forth in the poem. Life itself can often be such a distraction from truly living that we forget to enjoy our limited time in the world. In the middle of our artificial anxieties and obligations, forces of nature make us pause and ponder, and help us in getting our priorities right. So remember to appreciate the little joys of life. Anomalies. The examples of a crow and hemlock tree doing something nice for a human being remind us that the world and our lives are full of anomalies, things which defy their repetitions. Not everything beautiful will be worthy of admiration. Conversely, not everything unattractive will be worthless. So, don't go by appearances and reputations. Dynamism. The narrator's ability to be positively influenced by dust of snow reminds us of the importance of embracing life as it comes our way. Do not dwell on past, neither rely too much on the future. To be in full control of life, we need to be fully aware of it in each and every moment. So, instead of fearing it, welcome change and keep moving on, taking the ups and downs in a stride.